Welcome back for another episode of The Art of Giving a Damn. I'm super excited to share our guest today with you, Natasha Che. She is the founder of Soundwise, which is an innovative audio platform that helps podcasters build an engaged audience and convert listeners into customers, which is what we are going to be talking a little bit about today. Real quick before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by Splash Click, where making a splash online is as simple as a few clicks. You can check it out at splashclick.com. So Natasha, I'm excited to have you on today.
Yes, Michelle, thanks for having me. I'm already having so much fun here chatting with you just before the show.
Well, we were talking a little bit about the fact that, you started a podcast and it maybe didn't work in certain ways as well as it could have. That's something that you've learned by trial and error over the years. So let's start there. What is the biggest mistake you see podcasters making?
Oh, don't get me started on this. The biggest mistake, seriously, the most new podcasters. So I'm talking about like people who start podcasts, like people who are experts and influencers and solopreneurs. You start a podcast, you're thinking, oh, I use podcasts to build my brand. Podcasting is hot,
Yep.
And a lot of people, when they first started, their first goal is, how do I get more listeners?
Yeah.
Right? How do I get more exposure? How do I get on like a gazillion platforms so that I can get like everybody covered? So the focus all on getting listeners and getting listeners. And that is just, I tell people that is the number one like mindset mistake that people make.
Okay. So if we shouldn't be focused on listener numbers, what should we be focused on?
So, so in my upcoming course called Podcast Conversion Master Course, which I will share with you a bit later. But really, this is something I tell people like so many times, because every time I coach people on, when they're starting their podcast, I tell people, if you get anything out of our session today, usually I do these like one-on-one sessions, it is that, 80-20 rule about podcasting. Of course, this is, true for everything, but for podcasting, especially true because you put so much time and energy into producing a podcast. You're a podcast host. You know how much work this takes, right? Yeah. Especially you have guest ons, like enormous logistic work. And if you do a solo show, well, you have to come up with all that content.
Yeah. There's a reason I do interviews.
Well, it's not easy. Interviews are not easy. And that's another misconception. Like people think, oh, interview easy. I just, let other people talk.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, there's still a lot of pieces. And you're right. So often we focus on the numbers are important, but it's not the listener numbers as much as it is, like you said, the conversions. Yes. Is it actually growing your business? Yes. Is it turning into clients for you?
Exactly. That is a piece, I want people to focus on is like, before you get all excited of starting a new podcast, like think about what exactly does this fit into your customer journey? So, what is the goal that you want to get out of this? Because, sometimes I talk to people, like I was just talking to a new client last week. And so she's already started her podcast. It's already been going on like for 6 months, I think. So I asked her, oh, okay, how's it going? And she's like, going okay. I'm getting more listeners. And I was like, have you got any clients out of, your podcast? And she's like, well, not yet, but everybody tell me that podcast is a marathon, not a sprint. You've heard of this before. Yes. So marathon, so that means I just need to be more patient. And I was like, and she also like something like a lot of people think it's like, well, podcast is to build my brand. And usually this is a clear sign that when people say, I use a podcast to build my brand, that is like 80% of the chance that person hasn't thought it through.
Yeah. And it's so important to stop and think, yes, it is about getting your message and your brand out there, but it should be converting for you into clients. And from the very first episode, if you have the right plan in place, even if you have no listeners, from that first episode, you can be converting clients in terms of the guests that you bring on, the other people that you connect with. And so it's
Yes.
so important to look at that and go, okay, what's the actual strategy here
Yeah.
beyond I want to get my name on iTunes or those pieces?
Yeah, totally. Because, I started my podcast, my first podcast
Mhm.
2 years ago. It was after one day I did the listen to my heart thing, and I
Mhm.
left a high paying job in public policy. And
Wow.
and that was a trip. That was a trip.
I can
Exactly.
imagine. We got to come back to that in a minute.
But at the time I was like, okay. But unlike many people, unlike a lot of people, they had some kind of side project right
Mhm.
before they took the leap. I
Mhm.
had nothing at the time.
Wow.
I had nothing. I really just listened to my heart. My intuition
Mm.
said, "It's time. Jump. Don't ask." And I was like, "Okay."
Wow. That's fantastic. So, and I know that that's something that you also share with people about because you do more than just podcasting. You've got a PhD in economics from Georgetown. You're a personal growth teacher. You're a contributing author to, I think it was Huffington Post, Entrepreneur, lots of different things. So you have a 5-step system that you share with people of how to find your life's calling and figure out what's unique about your business value prop. So let's talk about that for a minute. What got you to switch focus from the economics, the public policy, and go, new plan, I'm going this way?
That is a very good question. I'm so glad you brought this up because really, in the very beginning, I really, when I left my job, it was really one Saturday morning. I woke up and I got this very strong feeling that it's time that I need to
Mm.
shift directions. It like before that, it was always, sometimes I thought, okay, maybe, someday, one day in the distant future,
Mm.
I would do something else. But that was like, I got this very strong feeling at the time. It was like a calling from a higher source. And that was so strong that I had to take action on it. And so that is
Mm.
something, talking about the 5-step system. What I teach people is, you know, a lot of people ask, how do I find my callings, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, calling doesn't come from the human self, doesn't come from
Mm.
the ego, right? It comes from a deeper source. It comes from your connection with, you may call it the soul, the divine, the universe, depending on your belief system, right?
Mhm.
But it comes from a deeper source for sure. And the way to develop to discover your calling, the step number one is to increase that trust with that
Mm.
deeper source. So if I hadn't done uh, you know a lot of things like taking smaller risks along the way for all these years to practice trusting my higher source, that I
Mm.
wouldn't have had the trust, had enough trust to
Right.
actually take the leap, right?
That makes sense. Building your confidence that you can trust that voice, that guidance.
Yes, yes. So that is the first step I tell people
Mhm.
is, increase their trust. It's like a relationship.
Mm.
You don't go on a first day and a person tells you, "Hey, would you move to Africa with me?" And usually you don't say yes, right?
Yeah, that wouldn't work well most of the time.
So that mean that trust, your trust with that higher source it is
Mhm.
a relationship and needs to be honed and
Yeah.
developed over time. And you can develop it by take smaller risks and see what
Mm.
happens. And you take smaller risks following your heart, and you realize, okay, the world doesn't end tomorrow. That means maybe you can take more risks.
Gotcha. Okay. That definitely makes sense.
So that's the first step. And the second step I tell people is, to this is called I call it to reduce the perceived risk
Mm.
of
Okay.
finding your purpose or finding your calling, because this is something that really helped me when I
Mhm.
was a few months after I started my company. um, I just feel like things are not moving. So
Mm.
I was, sometimes I don't know if you've had this before. I'm sure I'm not the only one. You feel like you're doing things, you're taking actions, but it's like it's not like in the flow.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like you're heading. It feels like you're met with so much resistance.
Yeah, something just doesn't feel like it's working right. It's off.
Yeah. So in those scenarios, sometimes what I tell people is sometimes it's because not your entire being is on board with your plan.
Okay.
Your plan. So like take me for example. At the time I did listen to my callings and took the leap. But a part of me, my small human self, wasn't totally on board with the plan. It was scared. And, because it was scary. It was uncertainty, right? So what I tell people is reduce the risk, reduce the perceived risk for your human self. And the way you do it is the first question you ask yourself is, what kind of bad things can happen?
Okay.
If you actually learn about your purpose and calling from your higher source and take action, because quote unquote bad things can be, you may have to go without an income for a while. Yeah. You may have to relocate. You may have to, end some relationships. Maybe people in your life will not understand. All these are perceived risks for the human self. So these risks need to be dealt with before all of you can jump on board.
Yeah. I think that's something probably everybody listening can identify with, that little piece of you that's scared of the risks.
Yeah, because when all of you is not there, none of the actions are all that powerful. You may be thinking you think you're hustling, you're taking actions, but it doesn't have the oomph behind it. So really, this is like I had a huge revelation after I asked myself this question. I actually wrote down a list of things that may go wrong.
Okay.
And then I asked myself, I think this is something everybody should ask ourselves, is like, are you willing to say no to your purpose and calling if these, if some minimum conditions are not met? So we talk about, after you think about the list of things that may go wrong, like from your small human self point of view, and then from your human self's point of view, what are these minimum conditions that need to be met for you to feel comfortable? And it may be that you have to generate a certain amount of earning by a certain date in order to for your if we're talking about the good old Maslow hierarchy, we have these higher level needs for your purpose
needs.
And
Yes,
we have lower level needs that need to be met as well. So these are like conditions that need to be met in order for you, at least all of us to be on board with the plan, with the higher plan.
Yeah.
So really, I asked myself, okay, really, when I get down to it, what are the minimum conditions that I would be willing to accept as a human?
Yeah.
In order to follow my calling.
Right.
So I actually set some hard conditions. That I need to set this income goal in 3 years. And by 3 years, I need to hit this income goal. By 5 years, I need to hit another income goal for me to continue to follow this path. Otherwise, I'm not on board. Sorry, higher self. Sorry, God. These are conditions need to be met.
Survival is important so that you can continue with the higher self mission.
Yes. So I call this, negotiation with God.
I like that.
So, but really, it's a psychologically, it on a subconscious level, it helps you clarify what is holding you back. Really, and when for anybody listening, when you ask yourself, are you willing to say no to your purpose or calling if these conditions are not met? If your answer is not a immediate, that's right, I'm willing to say no, then you got to look at, okay, why is that? Why is there hesitation there, right? So, so I think if you do this exercise, I often see people get a huge ahas from this exercise.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on it. I haven't heard anybody approach it that way before.
So that's that's the step 2, and step 3, ask for clarity. Talk to your higher source, whatever that is. Could be God, could be the universe, could be your deceased grandmother. I don't know. So
whoever that is for you,
whoever that is, whoever that higher source for is. This is ideology agnostic. So I sometimes I do a morning exercise every day. Most days. On the days that go well, usually it's because I started with this exercise.
Okay.
On the days that don't go well, usually I started acting, in a reactive way. I respond to email, I go to meetings without actually prepping myself for the day. So this exercise I do every morning is I write down a conversation with my higher self.
Okay.
And so I write a dialogue of this is not new. A lot of people would, spiritual teachers to do this exercise. You write down your higher self and basically ask a question and the channel a answer from your higher self.
Okay.
But the thing is, this is way more. Is this 10 times more effective when you actually do step 1? When you actually do step 2, when you actually clear out the reasons, your minimum conditions, in order to follow what your higher self tells you to do. When people don't clear that step 2, then I get, people ask me, oh, I don't get anything. I don't get any answers. Well, because a part of you is not on board. We're subconsciously blocking that out because it's scary. Because it's scary. So so that's the third thing. That's the third step is, ask for clarity. And if you're starting a business, you can ask very direct questions. Who are my ideal customers?
Yeah, that's an important one to be clear on. Absolutely.
Who should I serve? So so those are things, you can ask very business oriented questions to your higher self. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk to your customers.
That too. Yes, multiple conversations there.
Definitely talk to your customers. But the thing is, Facebook wasn't invented by talking to customers. Twitter wasn't invented talking to customers. You ask your customers, any existing customer, hey, do you need this thing where you can post pictures for strangers to see?
Right. That's kind of like if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have wanted a faster horse and carriage versus a car.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of time it's helpful to actually get some help from your higher self.
Okay. Makes sense. Sounds like an important step in the process.
Yeah. Once you get inspirations from your higher self, then you can go ahead, you can test, you can do all kinds of, apply the best in marketing principles, customer development principles, the scientific steps to actually, further develop it. For me, it's really, it's because now for Soundwise, for example, we started as a general, podcasting platform, and anybody can put anything on it. But it wasn't until I sat down and I asked my higher self, okay, who am I serving? Who is Soundwise serving? And the answer I got was people who have a message to share with the world in order to transform other people's life, to make an impact. And so then I asked, okay, so what kind of professions are these people? What do they look like? And the answer I got was these usually, people who are consultants, coaches, experts, people who are in the helping professions. So that is, so that that had a huge influence on who, like, who our ideal customer is that we
Love that.
set for ourselves.
Love that. That's such an important piece that a lot of people skip over. We think, okay, this is the service I provide, this is the product I provide. Well, it's for anybody who wants it. And that may be true, but you need to know who you're looking for or you can't find them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And this step is really, your higher source can help you
Absolutely.
find that clarity.
Yeah. Okay, so what are steps 4 and 5?
Well, so step 4 is, take action.
Okay, that's an important one.
That is an important one. That is an important one. And that is important because, people usually wait too long, especially when you're just starting on the path that you haven't tread.
Yep.
So
it's easy to get stuck in that holding pattern of let me learn some more, let me get another degree or certification, or there's got to be another qualification that I need, and not take action when it is really about once you're clear, go take action.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not clear, but at least you have like what is the immediate action you can take to actually get you going. So to actually move you closer to clarity, right?
Yeah.
So like I was talking to someone, recently after I gave a speech at a in-person event, and a person came up to me and said, well, I wanted to become a public speaker. I want to inspire people. And I asked her, have you been a public speaker before? No, I haven't. Mm-hmm. So why can't you become a public speaker? What's the obstacle? Well, I haven't been, I didn't go to school for this. I don't know how to do it. And I was like, okay, so can you take classes? What is the immediate next step?
Right.
What is the immediate next step? It's like a lot of times it's much a smaller step,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's okay to take small steps as long as you're moving towards your goal.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
And when you take action, more clarity will emerge for sure.
Got it. Okay, so what's step 5?
Step 5, iterate. We talk about, this, because it's not like you communicate with your higher self, but usually you don't get the next 50 years plan laid out.
Right. That would be great, but I've never gotten that.
So usually this is a incremental installment.
Gotcha.
So really, you can always deepen that trust, deepen that relationship with your higher self, with your higher source, and you can always ask for more clarity. You can always become, get more of your human self to step up and be on board with your destiny. And this is an iterative process.
That's great. That is a fantastic 5-step process. And I want to call you out for a minute on something and make sure that those listening and watching picked up on 5 things that you just did. And this is going to tie into you sharing a little bit more about Soundwise and your program. Guys, for those of you listening, I don't think any of us would feel like Natasha was super pushy or super salesy in this interview. But did you notice that one of the first things she did was mention that she works with clients one-on-one. And then she mentioned a specific client story that she helped somebody new to podcasting. She mentioned her course that was coming up and just said, hey, yeah, I'm working on this. She also circled back to mention who an ideal client for Soundwise is. Did you pick up on these things? They were naturally part of the conversation.
Yes.
And this is one of the ways, or 4 or 5 of the ways, that you get your interviews like this to convert into clients. Because right now, you know how Natasha can help you, what she does, who she works with, and there was nothing that felt salesy or pushy about what she just did. She didn't have to try to fit it in there. She just shared naturally, hey, this is my experience working with clients. This is who my company works with. So if you are looking to figure out that piece of, how do I go on podcasts and convert that into clients? Or how do I start a podcast that converts into clients? You just either saw or heard some great examples of that in action. So Natasha, can you share with us a little bit about the upcoming course?
Yes, totally. But I want to applaud you, Michelle, for we are going totally meta here. But this is so great. I have to point out because your comment is really, something that I coach podcast hosts to do. it's like, how do you best leverage your guest interviews? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of, new podcast hosts, they go on they start their show. Usually they talk about a little bit intro. If they're
Mm-hmm.
mindful about it, they put in, oh, I can coach you about, business development and check out
Mm-hmm.
my website. And that's like 30 seconds. And then they go on their interview. It seems like their brain totally changed. And then it becomes that the guest interview has nothing to do with their business. And then in closing, hey, go check out my coaching website. But the thing is, there's so many things that you can do while you're
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And you, Michelle, have demonstrated this wonderfully. Because you shouldn't be just an interviewer. You should be there. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
And this is something like a good way to leverage the guest interview, which you just show us, is to actually use the guest as a case study to demonstrate your own teaching point, demonstrate the value that you can give to people, right? So you just provided a commentary to your listeners to showcase, hey, you see, like I pointed out stuff that you didn't notice before, because I have the perspective, because I have the expertise. So of course you didn't say that, but that is the effect.
And it is something that if you start with a strategy and plan in place for, this is how this allows me to showcase not only my guests, but my own skills, and you approach it that way, your podcast has a totally different effect.
Yes, totally.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is also something that, that we teach in our upcoming course, which is the podcast conversion master course. This is one of the things we teach is, how you actually leverage guest interviews. I have clients who said, I haven't got any customers from my podcast, but my guests, they have.
Well, that's good. And
how unfair is
your
that?
Strategy in place. Yeah.
How unfair is that? You're here doing all this work, putting in all this, like connecting with guests and put them on the shows and doing all the social media and to promote them, and you don't get any.
Yes. You should absolutely be getting clients. And the other thing that I will share with you guys behind the scenes, before we went live, Natasha asked me, and this was really smart, did I sign up for her affiliate program so that I could give you guys a link to Soundwise that was part of that? And I went, oh, yeah, let me go do that. So think about that as well. If you're going out and being a guest, how you can help create a win both for your host and for yourself. So whether you're either side of the microphone that you're on, you should be creating value for both sides, and both of you coming away with clients, with building your business from hosting a podcast. So speaking of, if you are interested in details about Soundwise and how they can help you get your podcast, your audio out there to a bigger audience, help you reach more people, or about how to really turn your podcast into clients and convert with it, then click the link that you will see below this video or near the audio that you're listening to. You can find out more about Natasha and everything she's up to there. And Natasha, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about, your big leap, those 5 steps that you shared, and really showcasing how you can come on as a guest and share client stories and share things that lead to getting clients from podcasts.
Yes, because, I tell people, podcasting is really one of the most fantastic ways to establish relationship with your potential customers, especially these days.
Absolutely.
More and more people are listening to podcasts. We are probably going to see, I would say, 80 to 100% growth in the podcasting for just this year alone. So it's huge. It's huge. But if you want to do this, do this right.
Yes, have your plan and your strategy in place. And part of your plan and strategy should include in every episode asking people, like those of you listening and watching, to be sure you click like, subscribe, and tune in for the next episode. Thank you again, Natasha, for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, everybody have an awesome day, and I will see you back on the next episode.